We just want to show that.
Whatever. What is your full name,
Including my middle name?
if you would like?
Sure. It's Robert Stanley Kokoska.
What is your date of birth?
December 21st, 1946.
Where did you live in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement?
My parents lived in Berkeley, which is a suburb north of Detroit, in the 12 Mile and Woodward area. And I went to school at 22, what was it, on Linwood and West Chicago Boulevard in Detroit.
Did you have a job or work during this time period? Where did you work at?
I went to high school from 1961 to 1965, and then in 1967 I started working when I was going to college in my junior year.
Where did you work?
I worked at a department store called Montgomery Ward's. I worked in the sporting goods department and sold sporting goods including rifles and pistols.
How did you feel about segregation? If you were in school at that time, did you go to school with any African American students?
One African American student, but my school was located in the middle of an African American neighborhood, upper class.
Can you tell us any life-changing events that may have happened during this time period that made you look at the world or at your own values in a different way?
Well, if we're talking about the Civil Rights Movement, it was a major point of discussion in the family. My father was somewhat racist, very racist, and my mother was too, so whenever we had discussions about it, he would say, well, if you like them that much, why don't you go live with them? But he was using other words than them. And he was not in favor of Martin Luther King, and so the whole discussion about race and racism in the United States caused a bit of a break in the family.
President John F. Kennedy was the first to usher in the Civil Rights Act, which was put into law in 1964. Do you remember where you were when you first heard the president had been shot? What were some of the reactions to his assassination?
I was a junior in high school, and it was about 2:30 in the afternoon, maybe 3 o'clock, and I was walking around the campus of the school when I heard that he had been shot. And I was kind of surprised, but not as emotionally responsive as many of my classmates and teachers were. They were very, very, very upset. I was going to an all-Catholic school, and the fact that he was the first Catholic that was elected president also had a major impact on people.
Do you remember when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated? What kind of reactions did you and others around you feel?
I remember when he was assassinated, and I remember the riots of 1967 in Detroit. When Martin Luther King was assassinated, there was a lot of white people were kind of like thinking that's why he deserved that because he was so pushy. But there were other people who were really upset that a leader, and an intelligent leader like Martin Luther King, had been assassinated. And it was very upsetting because it happened after Kennedy and in a time when there was a great deal of turmoil in the country. Would you like me to explain the turmoil?
Sure.
In 1967, there was a major riot in Detroit, and it happened because of a raid by the police on a Blind Pig, which is an after-hours bar. And the bar was about 4 miles from where I went to school. And at the time it happened, I was working at a camp north of Port Huron, and we came back from the camp on that Sunday. The riot started on the Saturday. And when we were driving back on the east side, you could see the smoke of things burning in the city and heard all of the horrible things that were going on. I was working at Montgomery Ward's at the time, and in the sporting goods and in Southfield, and all kinds of people were coming in to buy guns to protect themselves because they were sure that African Americans, that black people were going to come and shoot and rob and loot and do all kinds of horrible things. And it got to the point when someone said he wanted to buy the gun, and he asked where the bullet came out from. I took the gun from him, locked it back up, went to my boss and told him I couldn't sell any more guns. And he said that was okay and let me walk away from it.
What is one thing that all people should remember from the Civil Rights Movement?
That it's incredible that one generation or 2 generations ago that there had to be a civil rights movement. that this country was so racially segregated and so incredibly biased and prejudiced towards people of color, and that there had to be a civil rights movement for it. The other thing that people should know, it's because of the civil rights movement that we have things like the women's rights movement, we have special education laws, and we have all kinds of other things where people are starting to accept people who are different. So the civil rights movement grew out of desperation on the part of African Americans who've been fighting for 200 years, and all kinds of people owe them because of, particularly women, who the women's rights movement would never have gotten started without the civil rights movement.
Okay, thank you for the interview.
That's it? Don't get to sing and dance? Or
No,
anything?
you don't.
Okay.